Okay, so anyone wants to come up and draw here the components that you found?
It's extremely bar across the top. Split gears. You've got your logo plus there's no tie. You had like a series of logos across the midline. Guy there. Make a post. Lake is beat up. Lake.
Cool. Thank you.
It's probably
Yeah.
more investment in there too. Right?
Right, and roughly, like, what are the main ones? Like, if maybe if we do a list on the side.
Okay. So imagine that there's, I guess we were calling it like a nav bar.
Yep, that's the proper name.
So up at the top, I would imagine, but I mean, is it subbed into like, I guess, the search?
Yeah, it could be divided into like two, but that's not going to the smaller pieces. Sort of like the
biggest-
maybe
biggest
five,
ones.
4 biggest one.
Is that a menu?
That could be a side menu, yeah.
There's the stories chunk in the center, which seems to be its own thing separate from posts.
That's correct.
The suggested group, and below that, the contacts list.
Correct. So let's do maybe like feed. Like the feed is where all the posts are. Maybe this could be like its own stories. Yep. Cool. Thank you, Douglas. Great. So let's think now. How would you build something like this? Right. In fact, like you had a very close experience building your group projects, right? What are some of the challenges that you sort of like see on an app like this that causes those reactions? Yes.
Kind of like trying to keep track of like how much containers you have. Like you have to make like a div for like the sidebar.
Keeping track of the elements, does it say? What else? Malik?
I use Grid like it's really good at making like uniform, like columns and rows, but when I want like different sizes, it gets kind of hard.
So like layout.
Yeah.
Layout is challenging. What else? Rena?
Keeping track of like your JavaScript edits, because if there's a bug, everything else can mess up.
So let's say like JavaScript organization, would that be? What else? The problems that you faced when you were, think of the problems or the challenges that you faced when you were building the app with the group. Yes.
Say connecting the different data systems.
Like data in general, like where does all of this data live, right? What else? Anything else? Yeah, so React solves most of this. Layout will still be challenging, but we deal with that on CSS. But React will help with organizing our files, organizing our data, which is more important, organizing the data, and then keeping track of what elements to put. And if you think about, like, let's say you notice that, for instance, when somebody connects, somebody just went online on Facebook, then probably their photo will appear like at the top. It will be sort of maybe a pop-up animation where their face appears and their name, and nothing else in the page changed, right? Or let's say somebody else uploads a new story. This sort of carousel, whatever you want to call it, will probably move to the right, and the new story will appear there. But this post will still be there, the menu will still be there. What is challenging about that? Yes, do this.
I feel like when we were making small changes like that, we would have to reload almost the entire page to get that kind of visible functionality.
Right, correct. You will sort of need to reload the entire page. And I think I saw some of you doing somewhere like, for instance, when you publish a new post on one of your apps, instead of, some of you are like reloading the entire page, which is fine where we are, and some of you are also doing it like appending, just grabbing that new post that arrived and appending it to the end, right? That is sort of like cumbersome to do, and those are some of the problems that React is going to come to help us with. Cool. So one more thing that I wanted to say here. I think actually we talked about this. How so far we have been building JavaScript or web applications, mainly like in one HTML file, one JavaScript file, and one CSS file. And when we get to a few more files, those ended up being like completely different pages, right? That the browser will navigate to a different page. But what React allows us to do is to think of components, like these things. So like this side menu, the feed, the stories, and be able to update them individually without having to modify the entire thing. Right, and that was the problem that Facebook saw. I think React was invented in 2015. Let's verify that. That was the problem that they saw, 2013, 6 years ago. They saw in 2013, and then they decided to go in and change that. Cool. So once we have sort of a sense of the problem, so here we are sort of like the same main components. Right, like this is sort of what we talked about. That DOM manipulation could be very complex, like updating this list when somebody went online, and updating this post feed when somebody posted a post. And what if like things happening like at the same time? Somebody connected and a new post just arrived. Joy, you had a question or a comment?
Is it possible to make the website responsive to push notifications?
Wait, responsive? What do you mean, like?
Push notifications, like something
Yeah.
updates. Like, hey, how do you do that?
Well, we could still do it, like just the pop-up that you. Well, one, you'll need some real-time data. You'll probably want to change your backend. Will need to keep a connection alive. That will be mostly the main challenge. After that, you could just display a div on the top right corner that is on top of everything else. And just style it very nicely. But the challenge will be in like having the connection between the browser, the front end, and the back end always open. There's something called sockets that you can look into if you're, I think somebody else had a question now. Right, so like changing, there's a lot of stuff that is changing here that with the traditional DOM manipulation that we've been doing so far will be hard as our applications become bigger, right? And React allows to think of an application divided into components. So like a good analogy is like you could think of React components as Legos, that you just put them on top of each other, that you can swap them, that you can reuse, right? And build a Star Wars spaceship or whatever Lego you can make. Without having to refresh the entire page without affecting the entire page. Questions up until that point? So like the general idea, concept of React. So, yes.
Was it harder to make than to use? Like when they were making it, did they make, was it complicated? I don't know what it takes to make it.
Yeah, like it's quite impressive what they have done. And to this day, React is receiving updates. Like when I was learning, and I don't mean this for you to be like afraid of React changing too fast. But when I was learning, there was something called React State. Now, 2 years after, there are some replacers that they found that are better. One called hooks and another one called context. React State is still there, and I could still use it. But the industry seems to be moving to those. We're gonna learn React State because it's a core component, and context and maybe hooks. Yeah. Yes.
Since you're only changing hunks of your site, I bet it's probably faster overall, right? Is there a time?
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm out of words.
So, right, like the fact that you don't have to load the entire page from scratch, that you can load little bits and pieces, makes it faster, yes. And like if you think, I don't know if you see how like when you log into Facebook, some parts will load first, or like this is true in YouTube. I don't know if YouTube is using React, but when you go to YouTube, the first thing that loads is the video. Nothing else, like the comments or the suggested videos, they take a little bit longer. But they must be using something. Oh, I think they're using Angular, which is another front-end framework like React, but this one is made by Google. But it has a similar mentality of components, of thinking of your front-end of your UI as separate pieces that you can put together. The three main ones are React. React, I think, is the biggest one. Angular, and another one called Vue. They all have that sense of components in them. Cool. So, how does that work? It's quite an impressive piece of software engineering. What they did is something called the virtual DOM. So let's first remember what the DOM is. The regular DOM that we are used to. What's the DOM? You can throw anything at it. That was Unit 2. What does DOM stand for? Document Object Model, right? And what do we mean by that? This is a question that you're probably going to get in an interview. What's the DOM? Yes, sir?
It's where your HTML elements go on top of.
Sort of, yeah.
Built on top of it.
Say that again?
It's built on top of it.
Is
It's like a
uh-huh.
field.
The DOM is built off your HTML. So from your browser, we'll look at your HTML and it will create a DOM tree. But what do we like? What's that about? Like object model? What do you think, Hugo?
Is it like how the JavaScript is supposed to interact with the page?
Yes, right. That's how the DOM is that mechanism that allows JavaScript to interact with elements in the page. That's why you can do document.query selector and grab an input box, right? Because the browser created a document object model where the input field is an object, a JavaScript object representation of the one that you see in the screen, right? And remember that, like, when you have your page, that you have sort of like the bodies, let's say the bodies at the top. Right? Then you have, let's say you have an H2, then let's say you have a div after that, and let's say maybe you have a P tag, right? And then in this div, we could have, I guess, maybe trying to represent this one here. So let's say we have an HTML page that has a body. In the body, it only has 3 things: an H2, a div, and a P tag. This div can have anything else, right? This div can have an H3, maybe, and maybe it has an H3 with an image, right? And this starts to, for a big page, this starts to look like a tree, right? Where you have sort of branches on these sides. And then when you do like document that query selector, what happens is JavaScript is looking into this tree to see any element that matches your selector. So if you're grabbing something by ID, let's say this H3 has an ID of secondary title, then when you do document that query selector, secondary title, what happens is JavaScript is looking through this tree, the DOM tree, for that element. Right? And for every page, a DOM is created internally, and this is when you do, like when you do append child, or when you do children on an element, you are talking about the DOM. Right? When you do append child, let's say if you have P, you do P that append child. What happens is that internally there is a link like this being made. Let's say we added a S tag for a strong, right? So how React is able to update only parts of this DOM, or how React is able to update only parts of the page, is because React has a virtual DOM. So there is sort of like the real DOM. Let's call this one like the real DOM. This is the one that that we have been dealing with for the most part. And React has a virtual DOM, which is going to look exactly the same. There are some differences that we're not going to get into. But what happens is, let's say on React, we will have the same structure. And then we do this. And let's say we change let's say inside of this we have an S tag. And let's say that inside of this div, so this is once we're building an application in React, right? JavaScript will create a DOM for all the components. Imagine we have like these components, these HTML elements. And React internally will create a virtual DOM for this one. Right? It looks exactly the same. And how React is able to update only parts of the page is that then we're going to make changes to this DOM with React. And we actually don't have to think too much about it, how we're going to be making changes to this DOM. We're not going to be using document.querySelector, getElementById. That is like all done with React. React will do it for us in this smart way. So let's say we want to add an image to this P tag, right? So we're just going to go and add an image there. Now when React sees a change in the virtual DOM, what it's going to do is it's going to compare this DOM with the real DOM. And it's going to see where there is a difference. And it's only going to update where it sees the difference. That is the core piece of engineering that React, or why React is as popular as it is, and as widely used. Because of this, what is known as a diff algorithm that is checking like two things and is able to figure out what the differences are quickly and update only the part that changed. So in this case, like React will look at its sort of internal virtual DOM. And then compare it, diff it to the real DOM that is linked in the browser, and it's only going to update whatever it sees the changes. So that will be, in this case, it sees these changes, and it knows that instead of having to load the entire tree again, it just has to add a new thing here that is going to be an image. And that is, let's say now in React, we remove this S tag, then React will again compare the two DOMs. It sees that the difference is in this one, and it's just going to go and remove that one without having to change and touch anything else. So, on sort of like a simpler explanation, that is how React does its magic. Cool. And at some point, like you don't even have to think about the virtual DOM. The only time where you have to think about the virtual DOM is when you have, which is going to be very few times, is when you have to, when for some reason what you want to do, you actually need to do it on the element directly, on like the real element instead of the virtual one. But those are very rare cases, and when you need to access like the real element instead of the virtual one, you're doing advanced stuff like animations, heavy graphics and stuff like that. That then React wouldn't handle. But React will give you some mechanisms to access the actual element in case you want to. Yeah. Cool. So let's get hands-on and create our first React app. So you remember that I said React is a JavaScript library. So that means that what are other JavaScript libraries that we have used? Or packages? Node.js. Node.js wouldn't be a library. Node.js is a runtime. Yeah. So, right, Express. Where do we get those from? Where do we get Express, PG Promise?
NPM.
From NPM. That's exactly where we're gonna get React from as well. So if we go to like NPM, you could go access another library. Remember that like library, modules, packages, those are all sort of interchangeable words. Then here React, and this is React. Let me just verify. I think yeah, this is the one. It's from Facebook, yeah. It has 6 million weekly downloads. Yeah. Yeah, JavaScript library for creating user interfaces, creating front ends. So there is in our README we have like these instructions with npx. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be downloading an npm package that give us some scaffolding for React apps. We're not going to be creating them from scratch just because to create one from scratch we have to do like a lot of configuration that we don't care about when we're just starting. So this package is called Create React App. It's another npm package. Create React app. To create a simple scaffolding for a React app. So the thing that we need to do is we could use npx, or what I like to do is npx is like npm, but it will execute the program instead of like downloading it. In here, what this is doing is like executing create React app. It downloads it first, then executes it, and then gets rid of it. But since create React app is something that we're going to be doing like often, what we're going to do is go to your terminal and let's install create React app globally so that we can use it a few times. So how do we install a package globally? Somebody, Peter? npm-g create React app. This is missing something. What's the command? What is it that we're going to do? Install. npm install. So this is downloading create React app.
Doesn't matter if you're in a folder.
It doesn't matter if you're in any folder because we are creating it, installing it globally. When we don't do globally, then it matters where we are.
I'm getting a bunch of errors.
You got a bunch of errors. You should have gotten an app like this. Check with the people at SUC.
Yeah.
You need to do sudo if you're getting an error, you have to run sudo npm install -g create React app. sudo. Sudo. Is it sudo? Sudo. I don't know. No, it's sudo. Space. npm install address.
That was just the.
Yes. Sudo means super user doing, which means like running something with administrator privileges. Cool. Everyone was able to install create React app. By you. Anybody else finding errors in NPM? Okay, so once we have npm install create React app, then we can create this scaffolding for the React app. So what we can do there is to create a React app, we are going to go, I'm going to go to the folder that I always keep, which is in core unit 4 now. And I'm going to go to React intro. React intro. I think I have a folder here, but you can ignore it for now. Yeah. So I'm in here. Let's see if this is big enough. I'm in my home folder, unit 4, React intro. That's the name of like what we're gonna be doing today. Right? So what you do to create the scaffolding for a React app is just call create React app, which is now a command that is available to you because you install npm create React app, npm install. And then I'm going to call this app simple social media app. Yes?
You said this takes care of like a lot of commands that we don't need to know right now, but at some point we're going to learn that stuff.
What kind of commands?
I'm not sure at the beginning when we did this, you said that like there's a lot of stuff that we still need to know when we're starting off.
Yeah, so what this is going to do, this is going to create, once we run this command, this is going to create some files for us that is like a very, like, so for us to create a React app like from scratch, there is a lot of configuration that we need to do, like importing some modules, like initializing React, and some other stuff that can be a barrier of like entry for us to like focus on the core of React. Yeah. So generally we don't like go onto the specifics of the configuration that create React app is doing. However, it is very useful to know how to create like a React app from scratch. But generally here we're not going to go into it unless we have the time available. Yeah. So cool. So let's run this. Create a new React app. So what this is doing is it's creating some files, and we're going to inspect those files, and is installing, as it says here, it's installing these 3 packages from npm. It's installing React, React-DOM, and React scripts. React is like the core library. React DOM is the one that is going to let us do the, or that is going to let React do the virtual DOM. And React scripts are some utility scripts that we have. You may ask, like, why isn't React DOM and React like one package, right? They are very commonly used together, but however, React, the core library, you could use it, for instance, with something called React Native, which will let you do React, but on a native application, like on iPhone or Android. So they decided to separate it between like React and React DOM. Yes?
What is simple social media app? Is that a file name or what is that?
Oh, that is the name of the app that we're going to be working on today. The React app that we're going to be working on today.
So that's also like a preset thing?
Oh no, this is us. This is whatever name we pick. Yeah. You do basically create React app, the name of your app. Mm-hmm.
A native environment is like a
Yeah, a native environment will be like an application running on iOS or on Android. Yeah. That's another cool thing about React, that like once you learn the core of React, then you can start to not only make web applications, but if you're interested in mobile development, you can learn React Native, which will be the same React that we know with some slight changes, and then create mobile apps. Yeah.
Cool. So everyone, did anyone get any errors on this? You should have said, you should see something like this. Added 1,600 packages from 714 contributors. If you contribute to React, you appear here, this number.
Is that the configurations you were talking
Yes, this is sort of part of the configuration that I was talking about, like all these packages and the files that we're about to see. So here, when you download npm, when you download Create React App or React, you're probably going to get the latest version. However, the latest version as of now is the one that we just got, which is React 16.12. This is how the versions are, like React or the package name at 16.12. And these two versions are always together, the React DOM version and the React version. The React script version, it does change because it's like more independent. Cool, and we can see that like React or these three packages depend on 609 other packages. No, 1,600. 9 other packages. So yes, this is part of the configuration. And now, if we do ls, now we see that we have a folder with the name of our app. Then let me show you what that looks like. Once you do cd simple social media to go in there, and then let's do ls here, and we see some folders and files. This was created by Create React App. Right? We didn't want to write all this ourselves, and there is some which is part of the setup. But let's look at, maybe let's open up the Finder here. Just so that we can see it a little bit more. So we have these files and folders, or not modules we are familiar with. Package.json you are somewhat familiar with already. There is a folder called public with some HTML files, some images, TXT and a JSON. Then the most interesting file or folder is SRC, which stands for source. This folder is where we're gonna write all our React code, all our JavaScript and JSX. In here we can see some app CSS, app.js, app test.js, index CSS, index.js, etc. So this is the scaffolding that Create React App is doing for us. That if we had to do like as the first thing before learning React, we're probably gonna get bored really quickly of just having to do this setup. That is why they created then Create React App, right? As a starting point for React projects. Cool. So now what I want you to do is, actually let me show you how to run this app. So this is our React app, and it's a very basic React app. So to run the app, what we can do is, by being in the folder, we could do npm start. Some of you are already familiar with this command, and we're gonna see where it really comes from. So start, and then you hit enter, and then React will spin up a server. You shouldn't be seeing this error that I'm seeing, but let me see that. I think I have something open somewhere else. Yeah, I had something here. We close this. npm start. So when you run that, one cool thing about React is that it has hot reloading. That when you change a file in React, you don't have to like manually refresh the page. React will refresh it for you. And it does that by having React is actually running a small server, like the ones that we have been building. That is the only thing that this server is doing is just checking for changes in files. And if it sees a change, then it just refreshes the page for you. We can see that that server is like running on localhost 3000. And this is a React app now. We see this. This is scaffolding. Of course, we don't have like any fancy stuff, but we have a window of the browser that opened up, and we have this page. So this page is being created, rendered with React. And you can see as I switch back to my terminal, you can see here that something called a compilation was successful, and you can see the server running in this endpoint. Right. React itself is not the server. Like the server is just a really nice feature that they did for development. React is the front-end library for creating user interfaces that will do this fancy stuff of the DOM and swapping elements. So what I want you to do is, well, actually, any questions to this point? Or was everyone able to launch their React app? Okay. So, yes, Joanne.
Is there any particular reason why HTML files
A little bit louder, that last part.
Is there a particular reason why the HTML file is separated from the JS file?
The only reason is just the scaffolding. Yeah, the way that they scaffolded the app. Yeah. And also because the HTML file, we're not going to be touching a lot of, like, in fact, once we're doing React, we're not going to be touching a lot of, like, HTML files. We're going to be touching JavaScript files that then create HTML for us with React. Mm-hmm. So you have to be very comfortable with your HTML elements and the like. Actually, let's take a 5-minute break. So I actually changed. You're using Bash, so that would be command server, but I'm using the C shell. The C shell is more customizable. There's something you can install called my C shell that will make it nice. So you can go on to that. If you want to change that, you can go through all my C shell. So just like only God instead of God, you can do it. Yes. So then you just download this. There's a menu. You really need to install the C shell first before you can install this. So yeah. Oh, no, actually, go on to the GitHub.
this is the shell that we call Z shell. And then all my Z shell is sort of like a framework on top that makes it look nice and a bunch of features. Part that you need to stop. And then after that you can go.
I think that was like a community member. Yeah. Oh no, actually, it seems that it was Facebook or maybe. Yeah, it seems like all these people got involved.
Like 2, 3, yeah. I don't know, bro. I'm just always wanting for it. Oh, it's like we're November. We're November. Nothing bad is gonna happen. Everything bad happens in October. I'm dead. When I broke my foot, it was October. When I tore my meniscus, it was October. When I had flare up, it was October. Everything happened in October. Look, I sprained my ankle in October. Everything happens in October. But it wasn't bad. Like, that wasn't bad. It's also because I didn't want to do that. I was just so graciously thinking about it.
Okay, so let's then, having our app running, remember that you can stop your app with Control-C, just like when you stop your server. And to launch it again, we do npm start. npm start will run a server and it will open up the browser automatically for us with our React app. So let me sort of like give you a real quick where that npm start comes from. I'm going to open a new tab here with Command D on the right. Then if we look with cat, if we look at the package JSON, if we look at the package JSON of our React app, yes.
How do you open a tab like that?
Command D. I'm not sure if that's gonna work on the native terminal app. I use this terminal app called iTerm, which is better than the regular one. You may want to check it out. That is like something you download from the internet. But here, let's look at the package JSON with cat. So this is the package JSON for the React app. I guess like first, like what do you remember? What is the purpose of the package.json file? A little bit louder, Suzette. Is the file where we keep the dependencies that our project depends on, right? So we did this for, we did like npm init when we were building Express servers, right? We had to create manually that file. And then that file will keep track of our dependencies. So we can see here that the dependencies of this React project are 3: React, React-DOM, React scripts. Those are the packages that Create React app install for us, right? And it keeps track of the version. And then there is some other configuration. That is, yeah, this is, we don't need to get into this now. But from here, one that I wanted to show you is this other. So there's this dependencies key where the dependencies are kept, and then there's other key called scripts. And then there is start, build, test, and eject. From here, the one that we're going to be doing the most is start. When you do npm start, what happens is that the start script in the package JSON gets called. And then what that will do is call another script called React scripts start. I saw that some of you had like, do you remember when we were doing like NodeMon app.js or NodeMon server.js? A better way is to set this start key to be like NodeMon server.js, and then we could do npm start instead of having to type NodeMon app.js every time. So that is sort of like a standard. So when you see like projects, and we're gonna be doing like more and more npm start. Yeah, most projects that people put like online, they tell you, oh, to run this project, download it and then do npm start. What that is doing is just calling this in the package JSON, calling the start script, which for React is something called React scripts. Cool. So that's sort of like something to keep in mind. So remember, I have my server and my React app running. So then open the app with your text editor, VS Code. And then you're gonna see your files here on the left side. Everyone open the app with VS Code. So what I want you to do is explore. To go into the files, go into the folders, maybe try to make some changes. Inspect what the files look like inside. Maybe come up with questions. The main files, let's look at the files only in SRC. Those are the most interesting ones. Just look at some files in there. Try to make up like things that you find from there.
The service moving is crazy.
you see something familiar, maybe try to make some changes. See if the app reloads and shows you changes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll go ahead and file so it's scanning. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, you would have to go to the terminal and type it in and you start. Yeah, should give me the local gospel. No, sure. I mean,
I know what you're I know what
So with whoever you're close by, just like
something that some of you were already doing. Just like start talking about what you found, maybe what you changed, and see if there is something that you have to learn from that. Where share what you found basically with whoever is sitting next to you.
Yeah, but you can change that.
Okay, so one thing, right, logo.
I think it's grabbing
So
this.
grabbing this thing, the logo
Yeah.
Yeah.
but by opening, it's not like, it's not simply like it's not like it's not perfect, it's just going to the right. I don't know what really that is. It's probably, yeah. Like the link seems like, I don't know what the rest like it's smaller. See how it picks it up. What you fix
I said something about somebody. I looked for 5 minutes. Got everything. You still don't like it.
think you need to install something.
We watch this on CBS. That's okay.
It is really no different.
I don't have it.
Okay, so what are some of the things that you found? Familiar things, weird things. What are some of that?
Let's say old and new.
Randy.
I recognize the HTML tags, but the recitable function.
Okay. Right, like
HTML inside JS. Like this is like question mark.
Instead of requiring something and setting it to a variable, it needs something called import.
This is called like that. I mean, import. This import is sort of analogous to require. Yes.
We discovered that this app has an offline and online mode.
It has like a call.
It has like an not it has an offline mode, or where it takes a little bit. It actually goes a lot faster when it's offline. Compared to when it's online when you make the changes. It's have to kind of change the wording.
Yeah, this is offline mode is something that React enables our apps to do. Since I think that will be more clear later on. React allows you to do what is known as a single page application. That you basically download everything that it needs, and then it can work offline, for some stuff. Let's say like you want to post a photo and you don't have connectivity. What the React app could do is it could tell you that it will save your photo to be posted as soon as the network connection comes back. Yeah.
So if it's online and someone decides to change the color randomly, would everyone in the world see a different color background?
No, they won't. So they won't see the new color until they come back online and they receive the new color. But you will be, if you are the developer, you probably have your app hosted on AWS, on Heroku, or one of those. The next time somebody like refreshes the app or logs in and logs out, then you can have, let's say you want to change the color theme of your app, then they will get the new color there. Yeah, like offline is no network connectivity, but it's like, I think now like we're all connected like all the time. I'm trying to think of like a native app on your phone that will let you like save stuff to be uploaded later, something like that. Like probably Gmail does this, like where you are not connected, you can still hit send. The email is not going to go out because you don't have internet, but it's going to go out the next, as soon as you get back online. What other things did you find? Owen.
It looks like, I don't see any like server type of file, but it looks like something like could be on the service worker.js. So I see logo host there, but it's like a weird, what the question mark thing is called, switch case, is that switch case?
The question mark? Oh, like ternary?
Yeah, ternary and service worker.js.
Yeah, so the servers worker, we're not going to get into it too much. But the servers worker is a JavaScript file that will enable the offline mode. Yeah, if we have time, we can go get into that. Yes.
Oh, actually your cursor's right on it. So logo seems to be the source is inside of an object. But it also, if you open up that logo SVG, it is the longest. You can scroll to the right forever on it. I don't know.
Yeah. Toggling the word wrap.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
So this is an SVG document or an image. You could open it with, this is like Real in Finder. Oh no, this is gonna open. This is this image. That logo SVG is this image. And it's a SVG, I think is vector graphics. I don't remember what the S stands for. Cool. So I guess like they all are HTML tags, you know, JavaScript functions. Or JavaScript in general, like this, you know, we are JavaScript developers. This is always going to be in our plate. What else? Anything else that you found? Yes, Joanne? That's a good point. New, instead, class. It uses something class called class name. But it has the same effect, right? Class name has the same effect as our whole class in HTML. Anything else? So there are like a bunch of new things. I want to focus on the HTML inside of JS, sort of related to what Douglas said about this is HTML inside of JS, or sort of the opposite, which is like JS inside of HTML. Yeah. Let's do JS. And let's get into that. So yeah, like we're gonna have the HTML tags that are the same. Yes.
Why are there two separate CSS files?
I think that is just the choice of the scaffolding that they picked. They want like the index CSS to be applied to the entire app, and the app.css to apply only to the app file. Yeah. Once we get to see, for instance, like we want this to be a list, and maybe we want it to a different color. Then we're going to have a file that says sidebar, and that file will contain its own CSS called sidebar.css. And we can have like feed.js and feed.css, etc. Yeah. Other questions? Yolan.
On that, is that why app has a capital A?
Yeah, so we're going to get to that next. Yeah. Or basically any components that we do in React, we capitalize their name. That is just like a convention. Yeah. So yeah, the HTML tags are the same. All the JavaScript stuff is the same. Like functions, let, const, if statements, all that is the same. And I guess like one of the most confusing parts is like this concept of HTML inside of JavaScript, and sort of the opposite, which is JavaScript inside of HTML. So it turns out that when we look at this app, if we look at app.js, we have this. Oh, did anyone like try to change anything here? Any text? Did you see the change? Let's change this to be something like, let's put this here. Hello 6.2. This is our first React app. And let me remove the rest. We save, and oh, this is supposed to reload. Okay, yeah. It reload, and now it has that content. Right. So let's look at what this looks like. So one is we have a function that is just called app, and that function returns something weird, which is like HTML. It returns like a div, right? And then this is like sort of regular all HTML. Class name is a little bit weird. The header, we have image, p tags, etc. But we can have here, or this is what is known. This syntax is known as JSX. This is I don't remember if it stands for anything. JSX is an extension in JavaScript that the React team came out with for better developing React applications. The all way, I can show you the all way, so for you to sort of have a frame of reference. I was looking at it here. So, let's see. You see this, for instance, this code here. We have like header, ignore the class part, just like this part, returning this h1, right? This is how we can write it now, but before it will be something like this, a function that returns React create element, we want an h1, what class name we want, and they saw that this writing code like this was just very cumbersome, and then they decided to sort of embed it in HTML so that it looks like this. So this is what we know as JSX. Let's sort of give a little bit more context on that. JSX syntax. And then let's go on the React documentation, React JSX. Yeah, we can do something like this. We can save an h1, a header, on a variable. This under the hood is like creating an object, a JavaScript object, the ones that we are used to with keys and methods, and it's going to put it in the element variable. But it's easier to just do h1 instead of having to do React create element to create this object, right? This looks a little bit more simpler, etc. So yeah, if you feel as we move along, very confused with JSX, you know, again, the React documentation is great for deepening your understanding of React. It's like why? Yeah, you can read of more why they decided to go with that. Cool. So let me look at what we have here. Yeah. So it is a function with a very odd-looking return value with parentheses. And yeah, we see that code that looks like a mixture between JavaScript and HTML. That is what we call React. So let's look at this example to see a little bit more as to how is it that it's like JavaScript inside of HTML. So it turns out that in this part here, if we want to execute, like JavaScript in here in JSX, what we need to do is wrap it in curly brackets. So this part here is like a small piece of JavaScript. So let's do something like this. Let's create, let me see what the example was here. Like a name. Let's do this same example, but here. So I'm going to create a function. Let's do it in ES6. Salute. This function is just going to return hello plus name plus space. So, if we look at this good old JavaScript, this is just a function that will say hello to whatever name, right? Now let's say we want to use this function in our React. So let's finish writing that function first. One of the motivations behind JSX is the fact that UI logic, like logic for creating graphical interfaces, is close to the way in which that interface looks. This is why they decided to mix up JavaScript and HTML a little bit, because the logic to show something is very connected to how it's shown. So let's do this. I'm going to remove this p tag, or let's leave that. And now inside of here, I want to run my function. I want to run the salute function. So what I can do is to run some JavaScript in here, we use curly brackets. Remember that. That is going to be a very important fact. And then inside of the curly brackets, then we can call our function. We can say salute. So inside of those curly brackets, inside of curly brackets, I can write JavaScript. Sort of like embedding JavaScript directly. Then save that, and if you go to your browser, oh, hello, undefined. What did we forget? Passing an argument. And there is some spacing issues, but we ran our first JavaScript function inside of JSX on a React app. So in here, you'll probably end up doing a lot of the, when you get all the posts, you probably have a loop that is looping over all the posts, and for all the posts, for every single one, is creating a post element, right? Like a div, maybe with the image, with some text, maybe some buttons, right? Those kind of loops we will be writing in here inside of these curly brackets.
Question, where'd you put that?
Where did I put what?
Oh, I
Yeah. Let's create a different p tag for it. I'm gonna create a p tag here, and then I'm gonna paste my JavaScript. Oh, I thought I copied it in here. Salute. And then now it appears there. So try this on your own.
what if you change, maybe add another p tag, and put some curly brackets in, and then do something like 1 plus 2.
For this one,
Yeah,
What is another JavaScript expression you can think of to put inside of those curly brackets?
it's a keyword, so I want to put things. Yeah, terms. For some reason, the no, yeah, it just adds it.
Or EJSX.
yeah, me too. I was going street lights, so how much I'm like, she literally called me to get I have nothing to do. It's no longer.
Okay. What are some of the things that you plugged in there as JavaScript? Yes.
I found out that it doesn't print out
It doesn't print out booleans. That's interesting. So if you put like true or false, nothing appears, right?
Yeah.
Nothing.
So it shows as a keyword too.
Yeah. Anything else? So like, if 1 greater than 0, then return yes. Right, and then everything just breaks. Oh. Sorry, so I wrote this if statement. And yeah, so, and you're gonna be seeing a lot of this. Fail to compile. Parsing error, unexpected tokens. So yes, there are some things that there are some limits as to like the JavaScript that we can put in here. If it's an if statement, we'll put it like outside, maybe in a function, and then here we'll just call the function that let's say return yes. Yeah, right. We're gonna get into more of that later. Yeah, just like know that JavaScript what you put on in here. What you could do here instead of if statements is ternary operators. So you can do this. Yes, otherwise no. You will be doing more of this. You will be doing something like this later on. So if 1 is greater than 0, then yes, otherwise no. So let's change this to like -1. Now I change this to no. You can't use if statements, but you will use ternaries. Yeah. Okay, but we're gonna be.
Oh, it's just kind of like this.
Yes, Peter.
I'm trying to do a new statement that included a variable that I declared, and let me declare a variable.
Oh, right. Declaring variables is also not allowed inside of JSX, so I cannot say let num equal 1. So the thing is also like something to have in mind for now is what the JavaScript that you're going to put inside of these curly brackets will need to be JavaScript that returns something that is displayed to the user, like a string, like that yes or no, or that hello, whatever, right? You can run JavaScript that is going to return something that will be seen. A variable declaration is not something that a user will see per se, right? This is more of like internal. We'll use a function for that. Yeah, we'll do a function and just call the function returning whatever we want to display. Yes, like the JavaScript that we're going to be putting in here is with the purpose of displaying the information. The purpose of like processing the information and transforming it will happen in functions like this, for instance, where we are building up a hello message, right? So that's that. So I wanted to show you how this really works. So if we look at app.js, so one thing that we talked about earlier is so to import files or modules in React, we use import like this, import statements instead of require. This is because React is always like running on the latest version of JavaScript, and the latest version of JavaScript allows you to do import React from. On top of that, you saw that error that I say like fail to compile. So what turns out that what is sort of going on behind the scenes is this code, right? Like this is not JavaScript, right? This is JSX. The browser doesn't understand JSX. So what happens is that under the hood, this mixture of HTML and JavaScript has to be converted to actually JavaScript. So that is like that type of compilation, like from JS, from JSX is set to compile. It is compiled, and the output of that is JavaScript. So when you get a fail to compile is that converting JSX to JS fail, basically. And it failed because you have an illegal argument, illegal words, etc. Yes?
Is JSX only considered what's in the return, or JSX as a whole?
That's a great point. JSX is only considered what is in the return. Whatever is that mix of HTML and JavaScript. Like this up here is regular JavaScript. Mm-hmm. Good point. Good question. Savita.
Is there a reason that it's like set up this way with the div and the header? Like, is there sort of a way that it has to be inside of the return?
Oh, this is what we want to do. Yes, I think for now, yes, we're gonna have like at the top some JavaScript, some regular JavaScript, and the last thing that we're gonna do is like the JSX things. Yes, it doesn't have to be, but that is the most common way to do it. Yes.
Does it have to be in the parentheses like that?
Oh yeah, that's another good point. This has to be. Let me fix this. Let's say like let's call our function. This has to be the return of our functions have to be in parentheses. If we get rid of the parentheses, we get a fail to compile. Expected an assignment or function call and instead saw an expression on app.js line 11 in here. We need parentheses on these return statements. Just that's a rule of thumb. Whenever you're returning JSX, don't forget the parentheses. So other questions? Yes.
Since we're importing the CSS file at the top of this, do we have to also up there like put things we put the head like Express, import Express, or is Express inherent to React?
So Express is completely independent of React.
Or I'm sorry, not maybe Axios is another example.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Yes, here we'll do like import Axios. We're gonna do something like this: Axios from Axios. Yes, once we start to be using Axios with React, we're gonna do this.
Sorry.
Yep, that's fine. I think I saw another hand around here. Joey, I think it was you.
How does it know the closing parentheses of the return? I'm trying to break it.
Well, you're putting like a closing parenthesis here.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I guess this is a good point. And this is in the lecture too, the lecture notes. Every function that is returning JSX needs to always return. It must always return one element. What do I mean by that? So you can see here that we have this outer div, right? Try to put two divs like next to each other like this. Div So I have two divs now. One that says hello and another one that is like my app div. Now save that and you get a fail to compile error. This one gives us a hint. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So whenever you're returning JSX from your components, you want to make sure that whatever you're returning is enclosed into one main tag. Yeah. So I think that's how it's able to figure out that the parenthesis that you put in the middle doesn't belong to anything because it's doing the nesting. If I actually want to do this, then I will need to wrap these two into one big div. Yes.
I also did a thing where I put a parentheses around the first thing, I put a comma, and then
You put like a comma here?
no, I put an extra parentheses around that first div.
And then comma and then extra parenthesis here?
No, actually, take out the second parentheses. No, the second parentheses, yeah, that one. And then close that first div.
Close this first div.
Yeah.
It is closed here.
No, I mean with the parentheses.
Oh, like here?
Yeah, and then put a comma. And then put another open.
Oh yeah, it's not just one for parentheses.
But where did this div go? Right. The point is, yeah, I can only return one element, even if we have two. This is, yeah.
Oh, it's overridden.
It probably picks the last one, yeah. But yeah, this is not very common, don't do that. Just always remember to return one thing from your functions. So, a little bit louder. Oh, so there is, if you want to do something like this, if you actually want to have something like this, remember that you will still just need to wrap it in one div or in something called a React fragment. So let's do this first. I can wrap this in a div here and then close it in down here. Close it down here. Then we have my hello over there. This is my first div. And then the other app div is all this other part, right? It's just that the app div is being styled. This is sort of going back to the CSS files separate, and as well as the fact that this div has a class name of app. So this div, the app div, is being styled in this way with that background color, etc. But the hello div is just empty. Well, it's not style. It has this in here. So remember that you can only return one thing. What you can do is there is this called a React fragment, which is like open immediately closing. It's not an HTML element, and this will have the same effect if I close that one. It has the same effect of letting you sort of like put two elements, but you know, if you think about it, you're just returning one, two inside of one. Yes.
That means how they put the search bar inside of the nav bar?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And we're gonna be building like a very simple version of this, like next. I mean.
What's the difference between this one and the wrapping around div or any other type?
There is a technical difference that I don't remember quite well at this moment. You could do React fragments, and that's going to give you more information. Yeah. Just read a little bit of on React fragments. Yeah. Other questions? Let me remove that. So here, like let's trace back. Let's trace where is this app being used. Where is this app function being called, right? Because a function will not run unless it's called. So let's look at. Let me remove this parenthesis. So first we see the imports here, and similar to the way that we've been doing it so far, they requires at the top, the module that exports at the bottom. In here, what we're doing is exporting app. And the way in which you export in React is saying export default app. So the equivalent to export default app will be like module.exports equal app. So we are exporting app, the app function from here. That means that something else is importing it and using it. So did anyone find in the exploration that we had, where is that app is being imported and used? Sure. In index.js, let's take a look at that. So open this here. Let's look at index.js. So this is sort of where some of the magic is happening. So let's pull this one here to the side. Here is where we actually, or where the scaffolding is actually importing to the core packages. It's importing React and React DOM, right? And it imports some CSS. It imports our app. Note here how we do that. Import app from app. It is importing the service worker. We can ignore that for now. And then it's doing this. React DOM. The React DOM is an object, right? It has a function called render. And to that function, you pass two things. You pass in a component, right? The function that is returning JSS, that we call the component. This is sort of weird because you see how when you call a function, you say function, let's say in this case, we have a function app. If we wanted to call that function the regular way that we've been doing is like do app and invoke it with parentheses, right? In React, what we want to do is, or sort of to invoke it, we do it in tags like this. A function or a component in React becomes something like a tag. And what this is doing under the hood, is calling app like this. Basically, like this is just a prettier version of just calling the function. Yeah, so this app.js here. Yes?
What if the app function is an argument? You just put like parentheses?
Yeah, we're going to get into that next week. Yeah. Something called props if you want to start looking into that. Props, yeah. Cool, so let's get rid of this app here and let's create our own custom one. Yes?
You say you pass in a component.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I didn't finish that. You pass in the component, and then look at this. This is like the all DOM manipulation. Document that get element by ID root. So what you do is to React DOM render, you pass in the component, and that's the first argument. The second argument is where you want to mount that component. Like where in the DOM do you want to put this component, basically. And if we look at But we're not going to be creating elements with document.create element. We're going to be doing that with React. But note that here, let's look at in public, there is this HTML file, index.html. We're not going to be touching this HTML much, but the way in which React works is there is always an HTML file and a JavaScript file. In fact, we could see here. If we have, this is the HTML file that came with the scaffolding that we did, and then here, somewhere here. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, this is sort of like hidden to us. But what happens is the index.js will be executed, will be compiled. Remember that all this code that we're going to be writing is going to be like, or most of it is going to be JSX. That has to be compiled from JSX to JS. Then what React is going to do is going to inject that JS onto this HTML file, and that's how it's going to be linked, right? I was looking for like a script tag here, but I remember that it all happens in the compilation process, right? Because the JavaScript files need to be compiled first to JavaScript to be able to use them. But in here, what this is doing is, remember that React DOM taking in 2 arguments, the component and whatever you want to put your component. And we're not going to be changing this that much. But what this is doing is, if we look at this HTML, then we can see that there is a div here with an ID of root. This is saying, I want my app component to render on the div that has ID root. And again, we're not going to be like commenting here very often, because most of the time we just want to render our app to one div. And then this app component will be that spaceship we built with the Lego pieces, the other components. Mm-hmm. That's correct. That's a good, yes, the app and root will be like the container. Mm-hmm. We're going to have like one main container that we call app, and then everything else will be from there. So it's going sort of back to this is like something like this, app, and then let's say we have, for this one, we're going to do like sidebar. Sidebar, we're going to have a sidebar component, a feed, and the others. So just so that we, what happens if we skip this line? Let's comment that out. Let's save that. Let's see. Nothing renders, right? If we skip this line, nothing renders, because we always need to make sure our app is rendering to somewhere in the real DOM, right? So let's look at, let's say we don't like this app component, we want to like write our own. What we could do is write our own file. Oh yes, Peter.
You don't need to link your HTML with JavaScript?
Not directly. That is something that the React scripts are going to do for us. So you will be, and that is the process of compilation of the React has to convert that JSX to JavaScript at the end of the day. Once it finishes that compilation, then React will inject a script tag. In fact, we can look at it here. If we inspect this HTML, which is like any other we have inspected in the past, if I go to elements, let's look at the head. Oh, actually, I think it's at the bottom. I already saw it. So it's not in the head. is at the bottom of the div of the body. You can see these scripts here. All this, mainly bundle. This is our JavaScript. So this process of compilation of JSX to JS ends up being like all our JavaScript gets put into like a few files, and then they get injected here.
And then it opens in after like the load page, right?
Right, that's the last step of the compilation. Yeah, it all happens behind the scenes for us. Like if we look at the HTML file, we see that at the end there is nothing, right? Where we would see those script files that we see in the browser. But once we inspect this same page in the browser, it's the same page because let's say this HTML file is a template. It says here this HTML file is a template. So this is the same file. But now this one has these scripts here that were injected on that compilation step. Cool. So let's say we have. Let's do it here first, like a small example. I'm going to create a variable, say const my component. Right. And remember that I can do this. Let's do. This is going to be an h1. My website. Oops, h1. And then, so in here I created an h tag and I sort of saved it to the my component variable. I know that it's weird because it looks like saving HTML onto a variable. But if you're aware that at the end this is being compiled to JavaScript, meaning like that compilation process is a program that is going through all my JSX files and is checking for whatever JSX is written and converting that to JavaScript. Right? Some of you may see like some squiggly lines around here. Anybody seeing squiggly lines like red? There's red squiggly lines saying like that is not understood. No? Okay. That is because VS Code is like smart to detect JSX code. I think if you maybe Atom will also work. Yes.
So this is exactly the same as the return parentheses. It's just because it's one line, like ES6.
Right. So this is we could say, I don't know if this is an official term, but we could say this is a JSX expression, right? The same way, in like once we have a function, we could save the return of that function into a variable, right? These are the same. So we have that, and then let's swap here app for my component. And let's save. And let's see if this works. I'm not sure. Let me close this. Close this. Oh. I think I have some errors here. Let's look at this. Okay, so we have some errors. It says, my component is using incorrect casing. Use Pascal case for React components. So this is sort of like, Joy, to your earlier point, we tend to capitalize, or actually now it seems that it breaks if it's not capitalized. So I'm going to capitalize this my component. See if it works now.
You have to take a longer time.
Take a what?
Yeah, just look.
without, oh, okay. You know where this falls into? This falls into this. What did we say that this means? The angle brackets. It's like calling a function, right? My component is not a function. My component is just a variable that is holding some element, right? So I cannot really do this because this will be like calling a function, right? And my component is not a function. So we could do something like this. What this is doing is we have, so we give app or whatever component we give to the React DOM render. The React DOM render is the one that is going to do that comparison, that fancy comparison that I was talking about in the DOM, the virtual DOM with the real DOM, and then update the real DOM where necessary. The React DOM render is the one that is like doing that. Cool. Any questions? Casing does matter. I think it's going to complain if I do this. Oh. Well, it doesn't matter here. But whenever you have components, just make sure that you put them, their name capitalized. It's just the standard. So let's actually then start building this other thing. Again, we're not going to be touching like this React DOM render that often. It's just that you have to be aware of that. Well, we're going to have like, I think like 9 out of 10, we're not going to touch like index.js. We're just going to have like our app and they're built from there. So this is an example. This is like another example where, let's look at this one real quick. Copy this into here. So we have a function format name, and then here we just have element. This is how React will render. So we have this element here. This element is a variable that holds some JSX, some tags, and inside of this h1 tag we have a piece of JavaScript in these curly brackets. You could think of like the curly brackets as when we're doing a string interpolation, when you do like $, curly brackets to put like a string within another string. But here for JavaScript, to put JavaScript inside of HTML. So here we have some JavaScript in those curly brackets, and that JavaScript is just calling this function format name, where we pass in the user to that format name function. User seems to be just a function, not a function, an object that has two keys, first name and last name, Harper and Paris. And then if we look at format name, what it's doing is receiving a user object and concatenating the first name with their last name. Right? Then let's look at, let me remove this double render that I have. React DOM render, save that. We go to our website. Then that says, hello Harper. Take a look at this, make sure that it makes sense. If you have questions, just raise your hand and clarify that. The format name? It's in the README. Yeah. And this is all the code. There is no other code. Yes, so
Can you have more than one render, or just like only one render?
that's a good question. We're only ever going to have one React DOM.render. Yes. Maybe render is the last one.
Well,
So render is the whole page component.
Yeah, React DOM render. We're gonna see other renders that are like for the component, but React DOM render is for the entire app. Yeah. I think if we do this, let's see this. Let's see if this is possible. Yeah, so it will render the last one. It's like sort of like when you call a function, you will get the last value. When you call a function twice, or you know, if that function is console logging, you're gonna see the first console log first and the second one. Yes, Janice. What if I add a new div? You mean like here? Oh, like a completely. Maybe that'll work. Yeah.
there's also outside function is how it works. I guess the last one. Outside.
Wait, say that again.
Like if you would uncomment the last render you're working, like that would add priority.
Right. The last one will have priority. What Janesh was suggesting, then maybe if we render to a different element, it will work. Let's try that real quick. If we go into HTML, oops, where did it go? The HTML will be in public. Let's add like another div here. Second div. And let's try to render like, let's try to render this one to second div. Then that will work. But again, we're only ever gonna have like one React DOM render. And we're gonna see that next. So I'm gonna remove this one. Remain with one. And instead of doing the element, I'm gonna go back to rendering the app component. Remember, the app is a function. We sort of call the function in JSX like this. Cool. So then let's start to think about let's get rid of all the stuff that app.js has, so that we start with one clean. I'm also gonna remove this. It's gonna say React render. I want to render my app component, and I want to render it to the root div. So then I'm gonna open app.js. Let me put it here to the side. I'm gonna remove this logo. the salute, and everything else is gonna leave one div. Also, let's leave the salute. Let's leave the salute in a p tag here. Well, what happens if you skip the curly brackets? Did you try that? Did you try leaving out the curly brackets on JavaScript expression? Yes, Peter? Just comes up as text. That is because the curly brackets is indicating to React that there is JavaScript to be executed there, to be interpreted. If we don't have the curly brackets, then React just sees that as text. So I'm going to add the curly brackets because I actually want my salute function to be call. Everybody here with me? So let's go in here. Oh, wow. And we have this simple hello world. Now we have sort of like an empty canvas for us to start creating our apps. Yes?
What makes that default to center?
There is probably some CSS applied to an app CSS that makes it center. In fact, let's remove the CSS. And it's not center anymore. Cool. I'm gonna actually leave the CSS because we're gonna be doing a little bit of it. So everyone has this showing up in the React app. Cool. So let's then start building this UI, or at least of a simpler version of this UI, thinking of these pieces as components, as React components, then importing them in React, or importing them in app, and then seeing how it starts to take shape, being like the fig component, living in its own file, etc. So to do that, let me close this. Let's go back here. JSX. So what we're going to do is we are going to create what are known as React class components. So and we're going to get deeper into this later on, but there are two types of components. Functional component and a class component. And the difference is in their name. A functional component is written like a function. So like app.js, you see that app.js is literally a function. App.js is therefore a functional component. And then there are class components that are literally written as classes, as the classes that we saw in Unit 1, that we also got to see in the Express project as well. So let's look into this.
Great question.
Yes.
So pretty much, I'm assuming, so
Yeah.
the functional component is pretty much something that's reusable, but the class component is something that's a change to be used, right? Is that the difference?
Yeah. Yes, we're gonna get into it later on, but the class component will allow us to like save information within it. Where in a functional component, we can't really like save information that we can later on change. Cool. So let's do. So this is a functional component. You saw that like we can create functions as long as those functions return JSX, then that will render. React will display that. And then we're gonna learn how to do class components. Later on, we're gonna get into like the differences. When do you want one over the other, etc. So let's start to think about this. So let's say we want to create a contact list. Let's say we want to create this part here, and we want this part to be like completely independent. So what we can do is then let's create a file. I'm gonna open this side menu here. What we do very often is we create a folder inside of source. You create a folder called components. It's pretty standard. You don't have to, but it's better if you start getting used to it. Just create a folder called components. Inside of this folder, we're going to create a file called contact list. Contact list. We can say JS, contact list.js, but it's better for at least VS Code if you do JSX. If you tell VS Code that it's a JSX file, then it will do some autocomplete differently, some coloring differently, because it knows that it's JSX and not just plain JS. It doesn't really matter, but just for functionality, it's better if you do it JSX. So then we have an empty file. So the first thing that you want to do is to create a component. You will always need to import React. If you don't import React, it's going to break. So the first thing, import React from quotes React. First thing. If you have a function in a file that is returning some JSX but is never importing React, your code is going to break saying fail to compile. Like if from app.js, if I remove this, so far, let's look at that. Failed to compile. So what I did here was commented out the import React from React and left my function intact. And then I get React must be in scope when using JSX. That's the error. If React is not in scope, if it's not imported, then the compiler, the thing that is doing this conversion, doesn't know what you're talking about. So always import React from React at the top. And then what we're going to do is, instead of writing a function, we're going to write the component as a class. So first we do class, the name of the component, not linked list, contact list. It is also a very common practice to call your class, to call your component, the same as the file. So if my file is contact list, my component is contact list. And then here, what we need to do is extends React.component. This is another required step. The extends React.component. So yes.
Does the React and import React need to be single quotes, or can that be double quotes?
It can be double quotes, yeah. Any quotes. Well, actually, I'm not sure if backticks will work, but single or double is fine. So do you remember extends? What was that about? Sure.
As in, like, it gets the properties or variables, functions from the other file.
Or from other class, yeah. So we could have an example is we could have a class vehicle that maybe has the data that the vehicle class will hold are like number of wheels, maybe a type of vehicle. And then we can have a class called car that extends the vehicle class, and therefore any car that we create will have those properties of vehicle. We'll have number of wheels, we'll have like type, etc. So this is the same thing. What this is creating a class called contact list, and for this class to be understood by React, it needs to inherit from the React.component class. That's it. Never forget to, whenever you're creating a component, a class component, to extend React.component. So the next thing that we need to do here is we need to add, or the most important function that you're going to need on your class components is a function called render. And this function is for whatever this component is going to render. One function called render, the most important function that your class component is to do. And what this render must return is JSX. Return, let's do return H1 contacts. One function in our class, render. It returns JSX. It must return JSX. Now, because we want to use this in app, we need to export it. So we're going to do export default contact list. So make sure you have this class exactly as I do. Then you can import this on your app.js.
actually running in the recent only reason you go run jobs or stuff. So I'm actually running right there for each single server. If you want to pass in data, you have to do this thing. It's annual percent. And then that way you can pass it.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a drop down.
Okay, so did you import that on app.js? How do you do that? How can I do that here? Who can like dictate? Lewis?
Actually, so you import, or you write import, then you open your parentheses. I'm sorry, not parentheses, quotation marks. Then period and backslash. Then I just selected components and then select exactly the same context.
Is this correct though? Beautiful.
I think you have to put, for contact list from.
That's correct. We need to do this. What do I want to import and from where? We only do like import quotes when it's not a JavaScript file, when it's a CSS or when it's an image file. But yes, you always have to say like, what do you want to import and from where do you want to import it? So this is the correct version. Import contact list, import that component from this file. Right? So once we have imported it, then we can use it. And this is where the clicking of the Lego pieces happen. What we do is we have app. I'm just gonna put my contact list inside of app, like here. Contact list, and call my component there. Then we save. If you go to the browser after that, you should see your contacts header over there. If we did everything correctly. Yes. Oh.
But if it doesn't do nothing, you can write it in the wrong file.
So everyone is seeing the contacts on the page? Cool, we have that. Let me remove the hello world. Oh, let's just leave it. Cool. So let's add a little bit more to. So here we just added our, sort of like first Lego piece. So we have app that is this container. We have app, and then we just added contact list. When we're talking about React components, we also talk about parent and child. So we say contact list is a child of app, or app is the parent of contact list. Right? Let's actually make this look a little bit more like a contact list. So I'm gonna have a div here. Actually, I'm gonna copy it since we're kind of running short on time. I'm just gonna copy what we have in the lesson. What we have in here is contact list. We have this. Just my UL. I copy that UL. I paste it right underneath my header. Like that. And then let's go back to the browser, our React app. Cool. We see our contact list now with some contacts. Let's do, I don't remember if we had like some styling in this, but I think we're not gonna have the time to do the styling. Cool. And then we render it in our contact list. So any questions to this point about creating a file that has a class component called contact list? Remember that it needs to extend from React component, and it must have a render function. What happens if we remove the render function or we just call it something else? It doesn't work, and it says instance.render is not a function, saying I cannot find the render function to display this component. This is why the render function is the most important function in a class component, because the render function is in charge of returning the JSX that will be displayed. Right? Cool. So we have a context. Now what you're going to do is then we display it like this. Context. Now let's build the feed component yourself. So I'll say type it, even though you could copy and paste it. Type this so that you develop the muscle memory of typing class, extending from React component, and then adding the feed component to the app.js. Remember that this is the name of the and make sure that it matches the name of your class. Remember that the name of the component has to be capital. So remember that the name of your components have to be capital. The name of your classes have to be capital. If it's lowercase, React will complain and not work. So I call my class contact list. You have to create the class feed post. Yeah, you can put it in the app.js, but the whole point is sort of like to have Lego pieces that then we can put together.
I'm not sure if it's the same question, but the extension of these is the JS.
The extended React
You have space. Yeah, you have space. This name has space. Spelling mistakes. One post on the page.
Don't like that. I like it. Yeah. Like they were that shit is not sketchy. It's not honestly all it's sad. It's like it's really like a team or something. It's like a full swing. Yeah. Do you see where the bus is? Sketchy.
So any questions about this before we depart? Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing how, and I guess by me, did start applying like how they're
Right.
use Flexbox and such. Display them properly.
I would say try to get through this maybe tomorrow before class to like finishing this, and then we can just review it here tomorrow. Yeah. Yes, and please do the exit ticket now.
Oh.
What is the service worker thinking?
It's part of the admin is what allows outline.
No,
Should have came back to New York, and then you guys use
So that's it for today. Also, please fill out the end of unit survey. Give us your radical candor there. You don't have to do it today. Just make sure that you get it done as soon as possible. This is 6-2, yeah.
I'm telling you, y'all, like, yeah, it was like, it didn't look right. I said, don't ever.
I'll do it.
I don't know why they put I don't know, but have you gone to what's form? Okay. There's no hotel on this form. Here, right off the phone, right? Or this one, like, on a constant. So listen,